Morning.
Oh, Tanya's here. Hi.
Hi, Tanya.
Love you, Tanya.
Hi, Lynn. So nice to see you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. And out of respect for everyone's time, we are going to go ahead and just get started. And because this is a Mindful Healthcare Collective event, let's go ahead and start with a settling practice, our soft landing for this session in community together. So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes or lower your gaze a few inches in front of you. And simply notice the points of contact between you and your environment. Perhaps the support of the ground beneath your feet, the support of the chair or whatever it is that you're sitting upon. Remembering that that support is available to you unconditionally at any time. Leaving everything that came before and everything that is to come after this hour at the door, giving yourself full permission to arrive for yourself, for each other. Remaining open. With intentions of receiving and sharing. And with that, as you're ready, blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Welcome back from our settling practice and welcome. I see Trish just logging in. Thank you so much for being here, Trish, as well, and for everyone for being here. And so, hi, I'm Ni-Cheng Liang. I am the founder of the Mindful Healthcare Collective, have been in wellness for trainees for the last decade or so, mostly focused on mindfulness. And I wanted to go ahead and just allow the panelists to introduce themselves briefly, and we'll get started. So I'm just going to go in my Brady Bunch box order. So Shivani.
Hi, good morning. I'm Shivani Mukkamala. I'm a pediatric anesthesiologist at Emory University. I teach mindfulness. I design and run the wellness curriculum for our pediatric anesthesiology fellows. And nationally, I am on the executive board and serve as secretary of Ignite Med, which is a multifaceted curriculum for women medical students by women physicians. And it's a free curriculum that's available to all genders of students, but particularly for women.
Thanks, Shivani. Payal?
Hey guys, good morning. My name is Payal. I am a life coach for women of color in medicine and an integrative pediatrician. I work completely tele now, and I have participated in coaching through Coaching for Institutions for AMWA. So I've been working with medical students, and in my private coaching, I had wonderful opportunity of coaching residents and fellows who have come to me on their own, which is amazing because this is not brought to them by their institution. And they found the need and reached out. So I think that's a little special when you do something like that and you go out of your way. So yeah, that's about me.
Thanks, Payal. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn Stiff. I am a family medicine physician at North Colorado Family Medicine, and I'm faculty and run their wellness curriculum. And we also do a holistic care track that incorporates a lot of wellness things, but it's integrative and lifestyle medicine focused. And then I'm the chair for Northern Colorado for Banner's wellness for all physicians and APPs.
Yvonne?
Good morning. I'm Yvonne Ator. I am a full-time physician coach, advocate, and facilitator. I've spent pretty much the past decade coaching physicians and physicians in training, mostly privately, but I've also done workshops and coaching for institutions like hospitals and residencies as well. focusing more on the positive psychology, dare to lead, resilience training, part of my work when dealing with residents and other physicians in training.
Anne.
I'm Anne Kennard, and I am an OBGYN. I'm also board certified in integrative medicine and lifestyle medicine, and I currently serve as the associate program director for the OB residency, and then I'm also in charge of resident physician wellness. I sit on the hospital wellness committee. I sit on ACOG's wellness committee, and so I've been in charge of designing a curriculum for trainees that has worked well at our institution and gotten funded.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We're going to launch straight into one of the biggest questions is how did you get involved, and also with institutional buy-in? And if you weren't part of formally like an institution, how did you get involved with like AMWA, for instance? So I'll open it up to the panelists to answer that question.
I'll go first. I was a hospitalist before I worked for the residency program, and right at the year when COVID started, in the midst of that, I had switched to half-time with the residency. And during COVID, it was very clear that there's a lot of low morale, and the residents could really benefit from some more focus on wellness. And so I tried to revitalize the wellness curriculum that summer, in summer of 2020. And then I think ACGME came out with some requirements at the start of 2021 for wellness. And so it was like a perfect timing for that from that standpoint. And so we had our residency programs pretty supportive. If you do things and it's like kind of feel good and no one's complaining about it, you can just sort of try it and see how things go and go from there. So overall, people were on board with doing it, and we weren't really doing anything that cost money at first. And then we started doing the health professional and wellness curriculum through Andrew Weil Center. And so that, since we're with Banner, wasn't a huge investment, but that is an investment I could see for other institutions. And, but we did ask for some money to go along with that to help with some workshops and things we were doing. And so since ACGME had this requirement, we were able to pitch it as being important from that standpoint. But it still is a small budget, but thankfully they've been supportive of allowing me to spend some time on growing this, and residents seem pretty interested overall in it. So I think that helps as well.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm going to ask a little bit more in terms of your time. Do you have protected time to be able to do this as part of your job position?
So as faculty, I have some admin time. And so you typically can use that to do sort of what I want to spend it with. Obviously, I have some requirements. I have to use that time, I have to get done at some point. And so it's not allocated specifically for wellness, but I'm somewhat efficient at the other things I do. So I'm able to fit that in. I haven't gotten to a point where I feel like my admin time is too filled with other things that I couldn't do it. But I do think with the ACGME requirements, I could negotiate for additional time if I felt like I started to need it.
Thanks, Lynn. I think that the ACGME requirement coming down really helped facilitate and leverage the incorporation, because it's like a mandatory requirement now for many programs already. Does anyone else on the panel want to chime in with regards to like buy-in, getting involved with wellness curricula for trainees? Go ahead, Shivani.
Sure. In terms of like how I got involved in wellness at all, it kind of started organically where I'm an educator. I'm the rotation director for the residents for pediatric anesthesiology. And because I designed my own curricula, I started just adding in things that I think are important for us to know and to be happy and successful. So I kind of just started incorporating it, and then people started coming to me for it. And then I started speaking about it. And with the fellowship curriculum, there was nothing there. And I think in order to be a good physician, this should be part of the curriculum. So I just kind of designed it in. and incorporate it. And I think because I am the one who designs the educational curriculums for our department, I could just do it. There is no funding for that. I just kind of run it. And nationally, Ignite Med, which used to be part of AMWA, and now we actually are leaving AMWA so we can partner with other organizations and grow ourselves more. We started as part of AMWA, this curriculum that Dr. Julia Files developed and created. And we kind of grew from giving talks to adding in coaching, which is like a really unique part of the curriculum. And we have a lot of benefactors, a lot of whom are women physicians, to help fund that, especially the coaching aspect. And now we are forming our own, formally are for becoming our own nonprofit, and we will be continuing to do fundraising and things, especially for the coaching aspect, in order to do that.
And then Payal, I wanted to kind of transition over to you getting involved with AMWA Ignite and coaching for that program. Like, how did you get involved?
Yeah. So, unlike some of these ladies, like I'm not on faculty, I'm not in an academic institution. And so my kind of journey was a little unique where, Shivani and them started this AMWA Ignite, and they, were looking for coaches, and through coaching for institutions with Dr. Beakey, she got the contract. She's like, okay, let's do this. So I actually ended up coaching medical students through Arizona Mayo with Tanya. And it was super fun to do that. And I think it was fun for me because I mostly worked private practice or corporate medical jobs. And so getting into that space, and we would get together once a week and coach group. I don't know about what happens on the back end, but for us, it was one coach, and it started out mostly women medical students, but we did have one of the guys join us, and we love him, and he was wonderful. So that's on the front end of it. And we, as far as funding goes, we just got paid our hourly rate and continue to provide services. So did I answer everything?
Thanks, Payal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Yvonne and Anne, so I know that there was a very recent collaboration between the two of you. And so Yvonne, the Dare to Lead curriculum with Brene Brown that you are a certified facilitator in, that's rather unique across the country for wellness curricula. Can you speak a little bit more about that in terms of implementing that and actually getting into training programs?
Yeah, it's a very, hi everybody again. It's a very unique program, and I'm also a private, I'm self-employed, and I'm a private coach. So my path is a little different, where people will find me through Brene Brown's site, or maybe people know me through, like, for example, Anne knew me through the Mindful Healthcare Collective. And other people who have invited me maybe know me through the things I've posted and shared. So my path is a little different, where people know that I'm all the things I'm certified in, and they reach out to me that way. But what I've seen, I'm also in the Daring Healthcare, which is more as a collective of people who are all certified in Daring Way, Dare to Lead, and other modalities, and are trying to, but are also in healthcare and are trying to get in. And what I've noticed is that it's been I've been doing this for 10 years, and the maybe 5-6 years ago was very difficult to get in. I think now that the climate is changing in medicine, people are now more open. But what I've seen is that usually there has to be someone who is at the institution who has that authority to get funding. But most times, from what I've seen, people are usually doing it out of their own time, their own energy. There's not protected time. There's not like funds put away. I think Anne's situation is unique in the sense that she was really supported. There was funding and all of that, and that was helpful to come in and do like a keynote or a workshop for people. But for other institutions, I've found like a mixed bag, where people are using their own funds, they're using their own resources to bring me in, or people are paying on their own. And I have seen, like, just coming from the healthcare collective I belong to, the Daring Way, Dare to Lead space, I've seen a lot of frustration with trying to get in and trying to convince. Now the physicians are convinced, but the powers that be, the administrators and the executives, they just don't see it. In fact, I had a meeting with a CEO of a healthcare organization recently, and he was talking about how he just didn't understand why people are going into medicine and then not wanting to practice afterwards. And I'm like, it's a burnout, so there's that disconnection between administration / executives versus the physicians. The physicians and the physicians in training have the buy-in, but there's still that bridge that needs to be bridged between those two groups. From my experience, that's what I've seen. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. And I know you're in multiple leadership positions. And so you've brought like innovation into your department. And how did you garner that amount of support and funding for this important work?
It was a mix of the ACGME requirements. I do think there's a little more perhaps natural buy-in. I'm on the Central California coast with, a lot of integrative modalities are utilized. And to be frank, we had a crisis in the program where the previous program director was fired, and there was just a lot of turmoil. And so I think there was more immediate buy-in from admin to try to do something to restore the well-being and the culture of the program. And then I am kind of like Shivani, I'm in charge of coordinating the residency didactics. And so it was easy for me just to put in whatever I wanted. But what I did was I created a formal wellness curriculum that involves multiple aspects of wellness. And it's morphed a little over the years, but what has worked well for us is to have a mix of mindfulness training. So we do the enhanced stress resiliency training out of UCSF for surgeons. And so we put that into that like intro safe block when the interns come in, because it's easier to schedule. It's 5 sessions. And then after that, we have occasional mindful practice, kind of revisiting. It is enhanced stress resiliency training out of UCSF. That's what we put in. Yeah, thanks for the question. To revisit some of the mindfulness principles throughout the year. And then I do a session on nutrition for busy physicians. We do financial wellness. We've put in some book clubs, which has been fun. And some of that is overlapped between skills that I want them to develop. So right now we're reading Thanks for the Feedback. And we've previously read The White Coat Investor, and then previous to that, Brene Brown's Gifts of Imperfection. And so those are sprinkled in. We have done some coaching in the past. We don't have that going right now. It worked better for family medicine than OB. And I don't know why, and then one thing that has actually gone over spectacularly well that is free is we do quarterly nature didactics. And so we have a afternoon set aside to do something together in nature, and which I actually think is very well supported by the literature and has been a huge crowd pleaser. And to answer somebody's question, I honestly think it's because the OB group at the time was not a cohesive, safe group. And so group coaching didn't work well at the time. I would be curious to revisit it at a time that, you know, perhaps the program felt more stable and see if it felt better. I funded some of this through pitching it to the institution and getting approval. Some of it was funded through experiential activities through the Integrative Medicine and Residency Program grant funding that I got from the Andrew Weil Center. And some of it was privately funded through a local donor that, you know, bought into the mission. And I have admin time that includes 0.1 FTE specifically for this purpose.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
In terms of funding, I also wanted to add in that some of my mindfulness wellness work came directly from internal grant funding. So at your institutions, whether it be academic or community-based, and even large national organizations, subspecialty based, like you might be able to find these internal grants for that are looking for proposals like this. So to not be afraid to put your hat in the ring for some of these initiatives, and you might get the grant, and you might buy yourself some protected time to be able to work on it and pay yourself for it. Because I think that's a really key important part, is that you yourself can't get burnt out running wellness curricula for trainees, right? That's like super, super important to set yourself up for success. Someone earlier posted about components of the wellness curricula. So for the panelists, do you want to briefly talk about your components that you've implemented?
This is Yvonne. Before I even go into that, I wanted to underscore what you said about making sure that you don't burn out while doing wellness. I know so many people who have tried to be wellness officers or, you know, directors at their institutions and have burned out trying to do the very thing that, you know, that is needed. But so just, I mean, I really want to underscore that. I've seen that in so many places. You know, really take care of yourselves as you're trying to do this work. And if your time is not protected, really spend some time thinking about why that is, but making sure that you fill your cup first before you try to save everybody else. I think that's a really important point. The components that I find myself using a lot in my work is around so a few topics. So I do a lot of like experiential learning, right? So there's a lot of processes, a lot of skills, very practical. Because I'm a coach, I'm a very practical. I like to teach skills and practices and really break things down that you can practice and integrate immediately. So work around compassion fatigue, breaking down the components of empathy and really kind of really in a technical way, really figuring out what parts of empathy you need to develop to be able to fuel that compassion fatigue. So a lot of experiential exercises around compassion fatigue, boundaries, perfectionism versus striving for excellence. A lot of mindfulness, you know, work with, you know, breath work and visualization. I bring in some of you know that I trained with a retired Navy SEAL. So I bring a lot of that mental toughness, emotional resilience work, because I, you know, in the beginning, when I first started doing this work, I was giving people all these skills to take off their armor, but then they were going back into unsafe conditions. So for me, it was very important to give people the skills and training to be able to still thrive while you're in that cluster F of a situation and being able to tap in. I know resilience is kind of like a almost like a 4-letter word right now, but it's really important before we fix the system to really tap into that resiliency. So a lot of experiential learning, experiential exercises, a lot of breath work and mindfulness work. But yeah, so that's kind of, those are the components I can think of off the top of my head. Very, very in-depth experiential work.
Thanks, Yvonne. I'm going to go to you, Lynn.
And leadership work as well.
Yeah. I'm going to go to you, Lynn, for your program components, because I remember you posting in Mindful Healthcare Collective about a session that you did that piqued a lot of people's interests. So love to hear.
Yeah, that session was kind of like an intro to mindfulness practices. And that was actually for our holistic care track. Everyone was invited, even if they weren't in the track. And so with that track, we do experiential learning related to different aspects of integrative medicine every month. And the whole residency is welcome to join. It tends to be the people most interested who are also in the track that consistently join. And hopefully it will grow. For our specific wellness curriculum, I would actually like to incorporate that one specific workshop in if we can this next year. I think the hardest thing is I want to do so much, and just like hearing Yvonne talk about how in depth she's going, like I feel like we just scratch the surface with our 1-hour lectures, and would like love to have a whole like 3-day event where we just like dive in and kind of really apply the skills. But we use HPW now as our base curriculum, and then we build off that. So it only takes 2 to 4 hours to complete HPW if you're just sort of going through reading only. So we've blocked 8 hours of time for the residents throughout their community and ambulatory medicine rotations. I think they do 4 to 6 weeks a year of that. So they get 8 hours protected to work on these modules and then apply concepts that are learned in the modules. And so there, at the end of every module, there's usually some sort of recommended practice of reflection or trying to figure out how to integrate it into your own wellness. And so that's one piece that's been really great to have as protected time, because when I sent out this required thing, there was a lot of pushback from a few very vocal residents. And I reiterated that this is protected time. I understand you're kind of moduled out. And my hope is that only 2 hours of that 8 is actually in modules and the rest is applying. And we've gotten pretty good feedback from it, but we also then use that. We do 6 lectures throughout the year that we tried to make pretty hands-on, and we use the information from those modules as sort of like, hey, read these, try to do these modules in advance. And then we're going to talk about these concepts like imposter syndrome, the culture of medicine. We also do some lectures. We usually do 2 a year where there's some sort of creativity piece, like we'll do painting, gingerbread houses, some sort of music application, just something fun and relaxing, but then also pair it with balance group type setup where by class. So the classes will break off. We aren't formally trained in balance groups, but they'll break off and there'll be a facilitator to just sort of help guide discussions about how things are going. And so that's usually twice a year. And then we do a big medical error one where people, it's from the book Attending, and people basically write an anonymous medical error they were involved in and submit it to me. And we mix them all up and everyone gets one. And then we read them and we talk about how, usually in the reflection, people, you can tell by their tone how they felt pretty ashamed about what happened. And it's very therapeutic, I think, as we read them out loud, people realize how hard we are on ourselves, because everyone else is like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have even thought that was a medical error. You know what I mean? Or like, that's just, medicine as it is. And so, and obviously there are some profound ones that come up as well, but it really has helped with the culture around medical errors at our program. So that one we've done 2 years in a row now because it was so well received. But those thankfully are again 6 hours throughout the year of didactics that are protected, where residents have the time and space to apply some of these concepts.
Thanks, Lynn. And what's HPW?
Oh, sure. It's the Health Professional Well-Being Curriculum through the Andrew Weil Center. And I'm not positive on the cost because again, it's through Banner Health and we're affiliated with Banner Health. And so I'm not sure what rate it is for the general public, but I think that they also have some grants if like, so if someone was trying to start this, there might be some other financial assistance. I know that they do some research with it as well. So I would encourage people to reach out if they were interested. And you can always send me an email if you want to talk more about what's all involved in it.
It was free for learners during COVID, so it may still be offered for free. And to your point about funding, every time I've applied for funding through the Andrew Weil Foundation, I've gotten funded. So I think that they're pretty good about that.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
Payal, what did you coach on?
That's what I wanted to talk. I wanted to share that because when Yvonne was talking about experiential stuff, so what Tanya and I and our friend Ami, when we coached the medical students, which was done on their time, so it was voluntary, so it's different. I mean, Lynn, it's amazing what you guys are doing. Makes you want to be like a resident again. But like we would have some kind of like general topic, but we wouldn't always like hold them to that. So something like relationships, time management, imposter syndrome, like boundaries, which was like a really amazing one. I think they all loved it. So we would do a little bit of teaching in the first maybe 10 minutes, not more than that, and then open for discussion. And I have to tell you guys, like, there's so much honesty that comes out when you create a safe space. And they knew that we weren't affiliated with their institution. So I think it was even easier for them to open up and say, hey, this happened today, or I felt like sidelined by my attending or my senior resident or whatever it was. And so we're able to coach them in real time on things that were really affecting them in the moment. I'm trying to think of any other topics. I guess Tanya can jump in, but we would just ask them what they wanted, and then we would just play with that. And sometimes we incorporated if something was happening in the world, you know, especially with like COVID or anything else, like we would allow for that to transition into, you know what, maybe we wanted to talk about this, but we can do what you guys are feeling today. So that's what I wanted to add as far as like, we truly worked with what they needed in that moment through coaching. And the other thing I wanted to add was, and I think what Yvonne said, and I really wanted to re-emphasize this, is we can experience burnout in every aspect of the work that we do. And that's why, you know, a lot of us coaches are extremely busy now. It's because we've done this in our clinic and in the work that we do. We can easily carry that work into the wellness space. So something that my coach said recently was like, the best gift you can offer to, and for us, it was like our clients, but for you guys, like your students, is your own well-managed mind. And I think it's so valuable for you guys to work on you, even more so if you're doing this work, because you're setting the example for your own residents, your fellows, your staff, and your colleagues. So I want to share.
Thanks, Payal, for that. And I find that when I was working with all levels of trainees, if I was very honest with everyone as to where my own wellness journey has been and was going, that there was an even safer space and a opening of sharing of vulnerability when you remind them that it's like a constant process. It's not all of a sudden one day, oh, we're well, and we can manage the trials and tribulations of practicing in medicine for the rest of our lives. Like there's no one moment in time in which that happens. I think it's a constant journey for all of us.
So it's funny that you're saying that, because I had someone who I work with, and because as doctors, we love like assessment plan, check, done, right? And she's like, okay, so I've learned these tools now, I'm good to go. And I was like, no, this is not done, I'm done. This is a way of living. It's a way of life. It's a lifestyle. So there's continuous work that you do. All of us do, like, you know, that we're doing for ourselves in whatever space we want to do it. So that's what I try to re-emphasize with the students too. Like, guys, it's not just, hey, I learned how to set boundaries, check, done. It's like constantly going back, constantly going to like a neutral party and putting it all out there, because the story you tell yourself is not necessarily all true. right? But that's how we build these stories and create like the guilt and the shame, right? And the smallness. So yeah, I think it's fun when people are like, done, check.
Thanks, Pyle. Tanya, I wanted to not put you on the spot, but sort of put you on the spot because you had worked with Pyle also in the coaching area, but then you also coach your own residents as well. So did you want to share anything about program components as well?
Sure. I just speak to the fact that up in Alaska, I'm on-call faculty, so I'm no longer core faculty. But since I still do have a supervisory role and I prefer to be an external coach, I don't officially coach my residents up here. I do physician toolbox talks that look and have a discussion that might look a lot like a coaching discussion. But I want them to, I don't want to do, so I coach mainly in programs in the lower 48. But the components are very similar to what Lynn and everybody talked about, but everything from boundaries, perfectionism, relying overly on external validation. I spend a lot of time on purpose and career, helping them get back in touch with why it is they're here and trying to connect that to like each rotation, like how does this rotation line up with what you want? Because until you put your mind to it, some rotations, especially in family medicine, seem like I'm never going to be an ICU doc. How's this really going to help me? So I think all the components, every single one of us that has struggled with anything, all of those things translate well for learners. So I mainly work with residents, and there's probably several other things I'm forgetting. We work on, for my seniors, the third years, we work on crafting their ideal job, their ideal career, and then work backwards so they can be intentional in trying to foster that. That's the ones that I can think off the top of my head.
Thank you, Tanya. How about you, Shivani?
Another component that I think is really good to have, sorry, did I cut someone off? Didn't mean to, is as I say this, is mindful listening. We do a session on how to be a mindful listener. And here I cut you off, oh gosh. For patient care, as well as with whoever you're consulting with as anesthesiologists, we have surgeons, nurses, everyone. So we actually practice mindful listening in the sessions. And I think that's a really nice one to do too.
Thanks, Shivani. And then I'm really honored to have Trish Luck here, who's faculty and teaches the mindful practice curriculum. So I wanted to ask Trish a question in terms of the mindful practice curriculum that many of us have trained with as well, in terms of program components that haven't been already mentioned. And thanks for being here, Trish.
Thanks, Ni-Cheng. I was really only intending to hover and listen because I think all of you are doing just such wonderful work and really fantastic what you've created and the community aspect of this. You know, so much of what we hear about wellness these days is really connection and community and being able to support each other through this work. So even in the wellness work, and I have a little my own issue with the word wellness. I would prefer to use the word well-being. And so I kind of will pivot a little to that. And so just, we know so much about well-being is really awareness, education, self-care, insight, this place of curiosity, which are all the different modules that you're talking about and modalities, and this place of connection. And so the errors module that was mentioned is one that comes out of the mindful practice program. And you know, there's simple things, and in my work that I do, I mostly work in the health humanities, but I have some electives that I work with medical students, and I've just finished one around shame and stigma in the medical environment. I do some work with them on empathy and mindfulness in medicine. And it starts often simply with this place of curiosity and just presence, right? So how do we teach the places to pause and to notice and to be present with all the overwhelm that we're in? And we also often, somebody mentioned the mindful listening, and so we work also with the communication modules. So Inside Dialogue is really a really good practice to work with that in terms of this place of just pause, relax, open, trusting what emerges, and then the speaking, listening piece. So it's this active engagement place that's here. And then one of the things that I'm more and more thinking that is really important to work with ourselves, with residents, with trainees, with medical students, with co-faculty, is, especially in these times, is really thinking about how do we stay with difficulty and discomfort. And it's something that I've had recent discussions with our master's students who come out. They're often just post their first undergraduate degree. They're not yet medical students. They're really struggling with discomfort and uncertainty. And so that's a place to really, many of you here are in the coaching world. That's a really hard place to stay, especially for medical students. And I heard about the structural elements. So much what we're understanding about shame and stigma is institutional and structural stigma. And I've kind of made a promise to myself, which may go against the whole ethos of this training, is to not be part of a wellness committee until some of the structural elements are in place within our institution. And so trying to work in smaller ways. I don't know if that answers your question, Ni-Cheng, but really wonderful, the work that you're doing. There's so many places to intercalate what can be done, and just showing capacity to show up for difficulty can do more than we know.
Thank you so much, Trish, always for your poignant insight.
Ni-Cheng, can I make a comment on the structural component? Because I think that's so important. And how I apply this to my residents is I think that all of the work that we do with, building resilience, mindfulness, kind of all of this thought work cannot be effective unless the kind of the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is okay. And so the most important kind of unspoken part of my residency wellness in my mind is a strict adherence to work hour restrictions. They're not expected to lie. We count all of the extra charting and just anything, in there. There's nothing that is like, oh, well, that doesn't count. If it's related to the program, it counts. And making sure that they get their parental leaves without guilt, even dads, making sure that their vacations are honored, just that kind of thing. And I wanted to just make specific mention of that I don't think it's going to be effective to build any sort of mental, social, emotional wellness work if those things aren't in order. And I guess the other comment I wanted to make, which I put in the chat, is that of all of the training that I've done, I have found I'm completing a year-long training fellowship in contemplative medicine, which I feel has really helped me become a more confident and equipped leader in this space. And so I've loved that program and put it on there. A couple of the participants, Cynthia and Gauri, are my colleagues in that program.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we come into well-being, borrowing Trish's preferred terminology, well-being curricula as leaders, we can be part of that structural safety and integrity that we bring to the program. So not being very forthright about truth when it comes to duty hour reporting, and then the safety and the punishment of quote unquote taking time off, that should be glorified and rewarded, as opposed to what probably many of us had gone through in our own training, would be like a shame component to it.
Ni-Cheng, that's I just wanted to say that was something I was really thinking about, this idea of really viewing ourselves as leaders, as the residents, everyone, trainees as leaders. I think coming up through, our medical training, we don't see ourselves necessarily as leaders, right? So one of the most powerful things I've seen in the work that I do is when I approach my clients and trainees as leaders and start to teach them these leadership skills, because I think the way the power structures are in medicine, it's almost like you are not the victim, but like everybody else is powerful and you're not. This sense of powerlessness and hopelessness that can be pervasive in medicine, and starting to approach the work from the space of the leader. A leader is someone who has the potential and the willingness to develop systems and processes to be of service to the institution they're in, right? So you don't have to be a leader, you don't have to have a title, but having this mindset of a leader I've found to be really helpful. The other thing I've found to be really helpful is really taking a trauma-informed lens. And someone mentioned that in the chat, and I wanted to bring that up, that medical training is traumatic, even if you've been in the best program there is. So with that sense of with trauma, everything is a threat, right? And so what I've seen is that when we have groups and trainings in institutions, people are coming in with their traumas, right? And whether they're shut down or armored up or trying to protect themselves, and sometimes that can get in the way of the work. And I found it really helpful to kind of bring them out of the institution to a more neutral space, or create a container where they feel safe, but really starting to use this trauma-informed lens for our well-being programs, I think is going to be really important moving forward. Those are the points I just wanted to bring up that have been coming up for me with this work.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, so at this point, with the remaining time left, I'm happy to open it up for questions and just a unstructured discussion to include our participants, because I know that there's a lot of expertise in our audience as well, and a lot of experience. So I'm also, while people are potentially going to be signing off soon, I'm going to put the CME link in the chat box. I'll also include it when we post the video on the website and also in the Facebook group. But here's the link for the 1 hour of CME there in the chat box. So yeah, if anyone wanted to, from the panel or from the audience, open it up for questions, discussions. And if not, I have my go-to list always of questions. I mean, we could have like a whole conference really about this, and there are whole conferences about this, but this is much more of a grassroots network programming that I wanted to try out. So thanks all for being here.
I wanted to offer for justification/funding. One of the things that I've done is watch they give them the MBI burnout inventory as part of the resident survey. So to see differences pre and post implementation of their curriculum. And when I do something like our contemplative approach to medical mistakes, like that kind of workshop, I usually give a subjective Likert scale that I've made up to say, like, this influenced whatever, blah, blah, blah. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Or for the longer interventions like the ESRT, I did a perceived stress scale before and after, which is a free validated tool. Another really good one is the shortened self-compassion index by Kristen Neff. That's free as well. And so you're already doing this work. So just thinking about maybe giving a evaluation of sorts. And then when I put that data together and it showed different changes, then I could bring that back to the administration and it was something tangible, you know, that you could hang your hat on. And when I was able to present that at like the Society for Teachers of Family Medicine meeting or ACOG, then it like made it legit, if you will. Like, you know, it doesn't change the work, but it changed the institutional buy-in. And I think that they were more happy about giving me money after showing a quote difference.
I think that
I wanted,
that's a great
oh,
point.
sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
I was going to say, I can kind of piggyback on that. There was one other piece with our wellness curriculum that we got funding through our med staff services. And so someone had mentioned, you know, asking your institution for money. And, you know, there is this foundation that many, if you are in an or some sort of large organization, that often is there. And so we were able to get some funding for a wellness representative who was basically a second-year resident who was on our wellness committee and then was kind of the eyes and the ears of the residency and sort of helped us as attendings know when stuff was happening that we weren't very aware of. And so we were able to get funding by doing similar to what Anne's saying, is we have some assessments that before and after comparisons to show that this has been beneficial for our residents, and has also improved the overall perception and culture of wellness at our institution, because she's been able to kind of bring it closer to the residents versus just our you know, our wellness committee meeting and the residents not really realizing the lecture is a wellness lecture and that kind of thing. And so that's been really helpful to kind of have someone in the trenches. And now our residency is paying for that spot to continue. So getting funding up front to just sort of then, like, once people like it, somehow someone has to keep paying for it. And so then we were able to get them to continue funding it.
Thanks, Lynn. Another couple of scales that are free for use pre and post. So there's a 2-item burnout scale that matches very closely with the Maslow burnout inventory. So it's only 2 questions. And then there's also the Oldenburg burnout inventory that's been validated. That's a bit longer. And then with my med students from before, when I was teaching mindfulness in medicine, I did do the perceived stress scales or the perceived stress score. That's also pretty quick and easy to score. So those are some other scales that are easily available. And then for mindfulness, the mindful awareness and attention, or attention and awareness scale, it's the MAAS, M-A-A-S score. And there's even like a modified MAAS scale as well. So hopefully that helps with someone's evaluation of their wellness curricula. Let's see. Can you send out the links offered in the chat? Yes, JP. I will definitely save the chat and put something together. And yeah, Maslow burnout inventory, I also got through Mind Garden. I think to administer one, it was like, at least a couple of years ago, it was like $3.50. Something like that. But then they have extensive scoring packages that you can also purchase through them. But like Maslow burnout inventory is kind of the gold standard. But there are many others. Any other questions or discussion points? Yeah, Kat.
I have so many questions that I'll probably just be blowing up all your emails, so I won't waste your all's time with it right now. I just am so thankful that this group exists, because I think I'm in a really challenging program right now, and half the time I want to quit, and then half the time I feel really excited about it. So I work in a new emergency medicine residency program, and it's not an academic based one, and it's a very masculine culture that is not really open to all of this. And I'm trying, but it's so important, and we have such need for it that I don't want to burn out trying to make it happen, but I have to try. So anyway, I just came here to say that I'm thankful for y'all, and I will be blowing up your emails, and I think it's worth trying. So, because I think it's important.
Thanks, Kat, for mentioning that. I'm pulmonary critical care, and being in a male-dominated subspecialty definitely makes this work a lot more challenging. That being said, though, we're very lucky in that one of our former presidents of the American Thoracic Society, his kind of soapbox was all about wellness. And so finding leaders in your subspecialty on a national level, and then going actually from a national perspective, and even asking for protected time for talks to be allotted towards topics like this, because it is an ACGME requirement, like regardless of the subspecialty, that might be an easy inroad, albeit a lot of these like talks are not paid for, but that at least can start the discussion on a larger scale. And then if the panelists would put their emails in the chat so that attendees can contact you if you're okay with that, that would be great. And I just wanted to send a huge thank you to the panelists, for all of you for being here as well. There's so much expertise, and this is just like scratching the surface. And let's continue the discussion in Mindful Healthcare Collective, because all of you are engaged in this important work of, this is how we change the culture. We have to take care of the next generation, knowing that the system is broken, and it's not that we have to be more mindful or more resilient, and that the system does need to change. But when we do become more mindful and we become more resilient, we are better able to create a spaciousness so that we can be the change that we want to see, and for the next generation. So I'm going to invite you to practice a closing session part with me, and just kind of close this container, and closing eyes or lowering your gaze a few inches in front of you if you feel comfortable doing so. And just noticing what's here for you now, what body sensations, what emotions. And I like that. Whoever just did a sighing breath, I love that. So maybe bringing your shoulders up to your ears, inhaling, and then exhaling through the mouth, and letting the shoulders drop. Knowing that this work is hard, but for many of us, it's very fulfilling and gratifying. Bringing a sense of gratitude for the panelists, for yourselves, for being here, for this community. Wishing you peace this weekend and beyond. Thanks so much for being here and blinking open eyes, letting the light back in. Thanks, everyone. I will be posting the link to the video in the Mindful Healthcare Collective Facebook group. Please, please, please invite your colleagues. Trainees are also allowed in the Mindful Healthcare Collective as well, because they are definitely part of the discussion. And also on the website, I'll post the link too. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. And I'll hang out here. And don't forget to click on that CME to claim your CME. So thank you so much. So I'll be here for a little bit, but I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Ni-Cheng, for
Bye. Thank